Hello, and welcome to third grade Unit 1 Math. We're going to be working on multiplication and division with 0 to 5, 9, and 10. During this video, it'd be great to have a notebook out. We're going to be taking some notes that could help you with this unit and doing some practice problems. The sheet at the beginning of your packet has the top part of this notes, so you can refer to that. You can have that open while you watch this video, or you can just go along with the video and take some notes. The first thing we're going to talk about is variables. Now, this is a new term for you, so you're going to want to write this term down and really understand it. A variable is a letter or symbol that represents a different number. Now, this is really not that new of a concept. You've been doing variables pretty much your entire math career. It's just in the past, it's been written maybe as a blank line or a box. Now we're going to start replacing it mostly with letters. And a lot of times we use a letter that represents what we're looking for within the problem. So let's take a look at our example over here. We have a drawing with 4 different sloths. And the question says, how many eyes in all do the sloths have? So we can write an equation that can help us solve this problem. Well, we see that there are 4 sloths, so we can put 4 down. We know that each of the sloth has 2 eyes. So we're going to times it by 2. Now, I'm going to start using a dot more often than the X for multiplication because X is a variable. It is a letter that could be used in a problem. So we're going to start moving away from the X in multiplication. Now, we can see that each sloth has 2 eyes. So we're going to multiply it by 2 to equal how many eyes the sloth has. Now, I'm going to look at my problem. It says how many. That's going to be our answer number. And the word right after how many typically is your label that you're looking for. In this case, it says eyes. So we are going to use the variable E to solve for. So our equation has that missing amount. We do not know how many eyes the sloth has yet. Our equation should not have the answer to our question in it. Our question should have a variable. In this case, it's the letter E. Sometimes you've maybe seen it as a box or a blank, and those could be the symbols that could be used. Now we're going to solve for this. To solve, we're going to start with the E, and we're going to say E equals, and we're going to do the 4 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. We could always count those eyes if we need to. And then we are going to put our label in, eyes. So we just wrote an equation that contains a variable, and then we solved for it. This is how you're going to start solving all of your math problems, whether they are picture problems or word problems. Let's continue on. Our next thing is to start learning some of our terms. In this case, we have multiplication terms. Our total in a multiplication problem is called the product. And the parts of a multiplication problem are called factors. So we can do a factor times a factor to get a product. We can switch it around and do the other factor times the first factor to get the product. Or we could actually change this into a division problem, and we're going to talk about that later in the video. So now if we look over at our example, our math mountains, we have the 8, which is our product, our total, and we have 4, which is a part, and 2, that is a part. When we're dealing with multiplication problems, we are always going to do part times part equals the total. If we were doing a division problem, That's going to be similar to subtraction, where we're going to start with the total and divide by a part to equal one of the other parts. So we have 8 different equations that can be made using these three numbers here. So if we have a multiplication problem, we're going to start with a part, such as 4, times the other part, 2, and get us our total, which is 8. We can start with the other factor and change our order. This is called the commutative property, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide. And get our total, or our product. Now, we can make this into a division problem. We always want to start with the total. So in this case, it's the 8. And we're going to divide by one of the parts. So we'll say 4 this time. And we get our other part. We can again start with our total, divide by the other part to get our first part. Now, those are the common 4 equations that most people think of, but what they don't realize is there are 4 more. In each of these, we started with the equation and ended with the answer. The other 4 equations actually start with the answer and move into the equations. So if we want to just keep going, over on this side, our answer was 8. So we're going to start with 8. And our equation said 4 times 2. So that's all we have to write is 4 times 2. So notice we didn't change too much other than we're starting with the answer. Answer was 8. Our equation said 2 times 4. Our answer here was 2. Our equation was 8 divided by 4. Our next one started with an answer of 4, and the equation said 8 times 2. So now we were able to make 8 different equations. You can do this with addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division problems. You always can make 8 different equations with those 3 numbers. Moving on. Our next is all the different types of multiplication models that we can create. The first one is called equal groups drawings. This is if you wanted to divide things into equal groups. You can create circles for how many groups you maybe have or items you want to divvy it out into. And then you can start placing a dot into each one equally. So in this case, it was bags of lemons. So you could see maybe we have 4 bags and 6 lemons go into each because we had a total of 24 lemons. So maybe this problem was something like, how many lemons will fit into 4 bags if we have 24 lemons? Or maybe it might say we have 24 lemons and we need to divide it evenly among 4 groups. How many, or 4 bags? How many are in each bag? The next one is equal shares drawing. So this one starts with our total. Each of those gets broken off by our times 4, and we find out how many times 4s we need to get to our total. The next 2 are probably some of the most common used. Our array drawing deals with rows and columns. So we have rows and we have columns of things. This might be if you're placing people into an auditorium and you need to know how many rows of seats to fill. And the last one is the area model. This one is going to be used quite a bit when we're trying to find the area of a given shape. This one is used a lot of times if we are going to carpet a room, paint a wall. We might need to know how much area we have so that we buy the right amount of product. Our next thing we're going to talk about is multiplication properties. Our first property is the associative property. This one says that we can group the factors differently. Notice the first equation has the 3 and the 4 in parentheses. So that means we're going to do that first. Times the 3 times 4 first. And then we times it by the 5. Maybe that wasn't the easiest way to do this problem. Maybe we could group our numbers differently and times the two bigger numbers, the 4 times 5, to get our bigger answer, and then we times it by our smaller amount, 3. So we moved the parentheses. Associative property is always moving the parentheses. The next one is commutative property. I like to think of like communication on this one. We multiply factors in any order. So we can do 3 times 4, or we can do 4 times 3. And like I said, kind of that communication. I want to talk, and then my partner gets to talk. Or maybe my partner starts and talks first, and then I get to talk. So the order doesn't matter in which we do the multiplication. This is true for multiplication and addition. We may not use these properties for division or subtraction. The last one is the distributive property. The word distribute means to pass out. So we can break problems down into smaller parts if we need to in order to work them out. 5 times 12 is a hard factor when we're first getting started with math. But we can break this problem apart. We can break the 12 down to a 2 and a 10. And multiplying 5 times 2 and 5 times 10 are much easier problems than just knowing the basic fact of 5 times 12. Division is going to start popping up in this unit. Division seems scary when you first get started, but it really isn't that difficult. It's just like addition and subtraction. Addition undoes subtraction, subtraction undoes addition. Well, division is a partner with multiplication. For division, we have some terms. We have the dividend, that is your total. It's the biggest number you would be using usually. We have a divisor, which is one of your factors or parts. And we have the quotient, which is the other part. So we could put these numbers into a math mountain. We would have the 15 on top. We would have the 5 and the 3 on the bottom legs of our math mountain. So we can look at our example. If we have 10 items, and if you need to, you can work on drawings. We have 10 items, and they're broken into 5 groups. What is our missing amount? Well, we have one group on top here of the 5 and one group down here on the 5. So we would know that our n equals 2. But again, we could have looked at this as a math mountain. 10 is going to be our total because in division, we always start with a total. We know that we have a 5 as a part, and we have an n as a part. Well, 5 times n gets me to 10. And if I know my multiplication facts, I know if I count by 5s, I get 5, 10. That would be 2 times. Input-output tables is the last concept you really need to know for this unit. An input-output table starts with a number as the input. You can think of it going through a little machine, and it comes out the other side after it completes the rule. Sometimes the rules are stated, such as in this case. It says our rule is multiply by 2. So we're going to take our input, we're going to times it by 2 to get our output. 0 times 2 is 0. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. And they already gave us the 5 times 10, or 5 times 2, which was 10. Sometimes they're going to give us the output. In that case, we would have to use the inverse operation. Inverse means the opposite operation. So if we were timesing the input by 2, the inverse or opposite would mean we would take our output and divide it by 2. We would do the opposite. So if I go 10 divided by 2, I should then get my start answer of 5. And I do in this case. All right, if we take a look at the bottom of the notes sheet, you'll see some practice problems. If you feel like it, give this a shot right now on your own. You can resume the video and check for the answers. Pause now if you would like to try it on your own. Welcome back. Let's take a look at the answers and talk through the problems. We have 3 bananas in a bunch, so our start number is 3. We're going to times it by how many bunches we see, which is 4. And we're going to equal it to a variable, b. We then are going to solve, and b will equal 12 bananas. Our next one is using that array of multiplication. We have 7 dots across the top, 3 dots across the bottom. So we can use 7 times 3, which equals 21. Or we can use that commutative property to change the order and do 3 times 7, which is still 21. The next one's using an input-output table. There are 8 legs on a spider, so our rule is times 8. 1 times 8 is 8. 2 times 8 is 16. 3 times 8 is 24. 4 times 8 is 32. 5 times 8 is 40. Now, this bottom part maybe is a little tricky because it said the area of the yellow, and really it's the shaded versus the white. Our area of our shaded item is 3 times 5, which gives us 15. The area of the white is 1 times 3, which gets us 3. And the area of both, we can add the 15 plus the 3 to get 18. Now, we don't know which unit we're measuring in, so we would want to say units and then squared. There's a couple different ways we could write that. We could full out write square units. We could abbreviate square as SQ and then units as a U. Or you can write it the way I did, which is a U with that little 2. Always make sure you're giving a label when you're doing area. The next one, we have 5 rows of stars and the same number of stars in each row. So we could write 2 different equations. Our first one could be a multiplication problem and do 5 times s. Notice I did not put any math symbol in here because when we're multiplying a number with a variable, we do not need a math symbol. We just put number next to letter, and that always tells us to multiply. And that equals 35, or we could put a division equation together. 35 divided by 5 equals s. And we get that s equals 7 stars. Not sure why there we go. Now, other resources. Remember, you can complete the grade 3 unit 1 skills plan in iExcel. Watch any math lesson videos. Complete the Math Activity Center lesson checks. And definitely make sure you have completed your notes, and good luck. If you have any questions, rewatch the video.